David Blough's system promises to be different, and while his reps with Jayden Daniels gives him a head start in some ways, the potential of delaying the arrival of his weapons is a cause for concern.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network, and I'm David Harrison, your guy on the ground, credentialed member of the media, covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA 9. You can also find me writing for Commanders on SI. I'm here with you 5 days a week, and coming up on today's episode, why Adam Peters can't afford to wait on Brandon Aiyuk and how leverage will play a role in when the receiver might become available. But first, David Blough's offense needs a versatile Z receiver, and if he isn't in the building in April, that could become a problem. All that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Washington is officially entering a new era, as it were. I think we kind of use that terminology maybe a little too much, but they're entering the David Blough era. It promises to be more under center. I don't think it's going to be completely under center, but more under center. It's going to accentuate the run game more, looking to paraphrase David Blough himself, make the same thing look different, make different things look the same, or something like that to that effect. And we all expect there to be at least a seasoning or a flavoring of Ben Johnson offense in there along with it. Now, in order for that to happen, there has to be a way to try to exploit the entirety of the field, right? You've got to have a primary X receiver, which is the role that Terry McLaurin typically fits. You've got to have your Z receiver, which is the role on the opposite outside receiver from Terry McLaurin. You got to have your slot receivers, and you got to have your tight ends, and you want them to all be in the building in April. When the Washington Commanders start their offseason program in April, you want to have as many of those people, including Jayden Daniels, obviously, to get into the building as soon as possible, because that's when you can start really the teaching process. That's when David Blough can really start to implement what his offense is going to look like with the people who are going to be the ones that are responsible for bringing it to life. But it's not just enough to have guys in the building, right? One of the words that I kind of hate the most that a lot of people use, I wouldn't call it a pet peeve, I just don't like it, is bodies, right? We need bodies in the building. Well, people are more than just bodies. People have traits, they have characteristics, they have abilities, and all of these things, right? So you don't just need bodies. You need specific types of people. You need a lid-lifting wide receiver to play that Z position. If you, again, this is all of it can look a little bit different under David Blough, certainly enough. But if we're kind of basing off of a Ben Johnson shell, and that's what you want. You want a lid-lifting Z receiver, vertical threat. Think a guy like Aiyuk Pierce, though I don't think Aiyuk Pierce is actually getting out of Indianapolis. And if he does, it's going to cost way more, just either in money and draft picks if they do tag him with a transition tag. I don't think Aiyuk Pierce is bound for the Washington Commanders, but Aiyuk Pierce is a type of receiver that you could look at to say would fit that mold, certainly. That would then create a void in the intermediate part of the field where other players can then kind of take advantage. You want a wide tight end inline type of guy who can block, but also can attack the seam, can attack the intermediate part of the field, say 12 to 18 yards downfield. Think Sam Laporta, think of guys like that. Kyle Pitts, Atlanta Falcons tight end, is someone that a lot of people talked about, although the reports are now kind of more moving towards official that the Atlanta Falcons are going to franchise tag him. So he's not going to be going anywhere. And then you also want that power slot that we've been talking about in this offense. We've been looking at perhaps Luke McCaffrey being in that position. We've talked about Treylon Burks. If he resigns with the Commanders, perhaps it'd be of interest or the Washington Commanders and for Treylon himself to look at moving him from more of an outside presence to that inside power slot type of receiver. And then obviously you need your X, the role that Terry McLaurin has been filling all this time on the left side there, to kind of bring everything together. Now the Z also has to be able to be a blocking type of player. He's got to have like that dog in him, right? That's the phrase that everybody always uses is he a dog? Is he not a dog? If your Z receiver isn't going to come back and block on a linebacker or help seal an edge and all these things, then it's not going to be a receiver. That's not going to be a receiver that can be fully unlocked in a David Blough system. And that is why Brandon Aiyuk is such an attractive option. It's not just that he's buddies with Jayden Daniels, and certainly we know there's obviously an element to the Jayden Daniels relationship for why Brandon Aiyuk is so commonly discussed attached to the Washington Commanders is that relationship. But there's also a skill fit here. When we look at Brandon Aiyuk's history, he's someone that you can definitely call a dogged competitor, someone who's not afraid to get physical with other receivers. And even though in San Francisco, he was a lot of times used as kind of that primary receiver type of guy, at least for a couple years there, led the team in receptions and all those things. You can also see moments where if he's not playing with the ball, he's playing away from the ball, or he's leading the blocking charge for the ball. He's certainly a guy who's going to get in there and get dirty a little bit. David Blough said something, quote, "We're going to make the same things look different and the different things look the same." That's what I was trying to say earlier. It's about strong convictions lightly held. We need everybody here to put the puzzle together from day one, end quote. And that's really where this episode was born, was that comments by David Blough on the day that we got introduced to him officially as media, as the new offensive coordinator of the Washington Commanders. That paired with a comment that I read. It was an NFL.com column. For the life of me, I cannot remember who wrote it, and I apologize, but it was NFL.com. And they wrote about how the Brandon Aiyuk situation, pretty much everybody agrees, is a done deal, right? John Lynch at his end of season press conference with the San Francisco 49ers even said as much, that it's safe to say that Brandon Aiyuk has taken his last snap, played his last rep as a San Francisco 49er. But even to this day, Brandon Aiyuk is still under contract. He's still a part of the San Francisco 49ers organization. Even though those voided, the guaranteed money has been voided, he's still on their roster. He's still on their books. So what are the Washington Commanders, or what are the San Francisco 49ers waiting for? It's a similar question that a lot of people have been asking about Marshawn Lattimore and the Washington Commanders. The only difference is, at least up until this point, and Tuesday, the Washington Commanders front office, Adam Peters at least, and head coach Dan Quinn will speak at the NFL Scouting Combine. So I'll be able to fill you in if they say anything there. But as of right now, publicly, nobody's really said definitively, yeah, Marshawn Lattimore is not going to be on the books. But the Niners, they have said, yeah, he's not going to be a part of this team anymore. Yet, for some reason, he's still on the team as of right now. The reason actually makes a lot of sense, but the reason also leads to a potential conversation about leverage. And if you're talking about making deals in the National Football League, leverage is really what it's all about. And the San Francisco 49ers use their leverage to kind of hold Brandon Aiyuk hostage for any number of reasons. It's going to prevent him from being in the building on day one, like David Blough says he wants. That means that the Washington Commanders, general manager Adam Peters, and all of them really have to have a plan to pivot. That's what we're going to dive into coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you in part by Home Chef. As the new year gets rolling deeper and deeper, a lot of people are trying to simplify their routines. Dinner is a big part of that. You have busy work days, cold winter nights, packed schedules. So having an easy, reliable dinner plan makes a huge difference. And that is where Home Chef comes in. Home Chef takes the stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your door with easy-to-follow recipes that actually taste great. They're rated #1 by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease. And it's easy to see why. Those meals come ready to fit into your schedule. They're 30-minute recipes, oven-ready trays, and quick lunches, over 30 weekly options, including family-sized meals and different dietary choices. And for a limited time, Home Chef is offering our listeners 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Just go to homechef.com/lockedon. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. You must be an active subscriber to receive the free dessert. Thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day to the everydayers. Those of you who come through for every single episode, I appreciate you coming through for yet another one. The offseason doesn't exist for the Everydayer Club. Join the group chat to talk about the Commanders all year round. Get every episode of Locked On Commanders ad-free and more. Head to lockedoncommanders.supercast.com or hit the link in the show notes to check out the Everydayer Club today. The San Francisco 49ers hold absolute control over Brandon Aiyuk and the timeline. And because of that, they also hold control over the Washington Commanders' intent to get every key contributor to the Washington Commanders' new offense in the building on day one. That is what David Blough wants. It makes all the sense in the world for everybody in the National Football League, not just David Blough, but specifically David Blough wants all of the role players in the building on day one. And John Lynch is the 49ers general manager, if you didn't know. Not only does John Lynch have reason to be petty and not let Brandon Aiyuk go where he wants to go, maybe reunite with his buddy in Washington or doing those things, he's got financial reasons to do it. And this is where things get a little bit more complicated if you are the Washington Commanders and you do have an intent on adding Brandon Aiyuk to the formula. Because again, it's not just about him being Jayden Daniels' buddy. I know that's what a lot of people talk about, but it's not just about that. It's about the fact that this is a very talented receiver when you see him on the field who is about to become available. Yes, he has a rapport with your quarterback, and that's a bonus, not a negative. Again, Adam Peters knows him very well. So if Adam Peters is willing to even have the conversation, then there's obviously some wiggle room there. And financially, he's not going to cost you what a guy like Brandon Aiyuk with his talent when healthy should cost you. And yeah, he's coming off of an injury, but again, remember, he's coming off of he's about to hit the 18-month mark since suffering his knee injury, which cost him the rest of his time as a San Francisco 49er. And in that second year from recovery of those knee injuries is when players tend to say they feel like themselves again. So the stars are kind of aligning here for this whole thing. But for the San Francisco 49ers, they have to weigh the financial responsibility for themselves. They don't have the most salary cap room in the National Football League. It doesn't even necessarily matter they need the money per se, but if they wait until June 1st to release Brandon Aiyuk or trade him, but release is most likely, right? Then they save $6.3 million in salary cap space in 2026. If they release him or trade him before June 1st, they take on a significant amount of dead cap space. So saving that cap space by moving it past June 1st, what it allows them to do is split that dead cap hit over the course of 2026 and 2027, whereas before June 1st, they have to account for it all in 2026. So every general manager that's ever general managed likely is going to want to spread that hit out as much as they possibly can. Now, there is a mechanism here that the San Francisco 49ers can use, and that is a post-June 1st release designation for a player released before June 1st. NFL teams are allowed to do that a couple of times. They can take a couple of contracts, release the players from those contracts before June 1st, designate them as post-June 1st releases. Now, they have to carry the cap hit all the way through June 1st on their books, but it allows the player to become a free agent immediately, go out there and sign with the new team. So the San Francisco 49ers could do that. And certainly that would then open the door for the Washington Commanders to go ahead and make a move. That would open the door for Brandon Aiyuk to be able to agree to a new contract with the Washington Commanders or with anybody for that case. But we're a Commanders program, so we're going to talk about this through the lens of the Commanders. And it would allow them to potentially have their potential Z receiver come into the building in April when the offseason program begins. And like David Blough says, have him on the ground day one. But there are a couple of reasons why the San Francisco 49ers would not do that. And we're going to kind of go maybe a little bit more off the petty angle and then come back to more of the kind of realistic professional angle. And the petty angle is clearly the way that the relationship between Brandon Aiyuk and the organization has deteriorated. Why would we do you any favors, right? Releasing a player with a post-June 1st designation early, what it really is a favor from the franchise to the player. Say, hey, look, we're not going to keep you on here, but to balance our books better, we're going to go ahead and spread your cap hit. Doesn't really matter to the player what's going on the back end of the accounting, right? What matters is, when am I going to get control of my future? So we're going to release you now. You have control of your future today. We'll do with the rest. Because like I said, remember, the team has to account for the entirety of the cap hit until June 1st, regardless. Okay? So by releasing a player before June 1st, they do the player a solid. The player gets to go out there and find a new team and a new job, and they get to do things like that. So if you're John Lynch and the San Francisco 49ers, why would we do you any favors? Also, there's a second side to that. Why would we do the team that's going to sign you any favors? If the Washington Commanders really are the team that is going to go out there and bring Brandon Aiyuk in because he and Jayden Daniels want to reunite. Jayden Daniels, Brandon Aiyuk, teammates at Arizona State, if you didn't know, and very, very good friends to this very day. Jayden Daniels even went as far as to less than subtly indicate that he would like to reconnect with some former teammates and some former Sun Devils and things like that. Rachaad White, running back, who's about to be a free agent from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, also is a player who is coming available, who I'm told wants to come to Washington, and through his own social media post did not really make it a secret that he wants to come to Washington. So again, both Brandon Aiyuk and Rachaad White could be in the same boat, but Rachaad White is about to be an unrestricted free agent. There's no bugaboo here. With Brandon Aiyuk, there's a lot of bugaboo. So that's number one. One, why would they want to do Brandon Aiyuk the favor? Two, the other side of this is, why are we going to do Washington the favor? Why are we just going to move on from this guy, allow you to bring him in, allow you to have him in day one, quote unquote, right? To work with Jayden, to work with David Blough, to get up to speed, to do all these things. Like, why would we also do you the favor? We're both in the NFC. We're both competing for the same thing. We both want to go to the Super Bowl. Also, the Washington Commanders are going to play the San Francisco 49ers. So you want to get Brandon Aiyuk up to speed as fast as you can possibly can, gauge how his health is, gauge when you might be able to have him available on the field to potentially come to San Francisco with not just Brandon Aiyuk, all by the way, but also Javon Kinlaw, another former 49er, into the 49ers house next season to try to beat them in their own house. Why would the 49ers want to do them that favor? Instead, what they can do is put out a call to teams. Say, listen, here's the deal. We voided all of Brandon's guaranteed money, so the bulk of the contract is gone. We're not going to release him until after June 1st. We're going to hold him until June 1st. He's going to be on our roster. He's not going to be in the building. He's not going to be in the team. He's not going to be working out with us. He's going to be out there on his own like he has been. But we're not going to move on from him unless you send us a draft pick. That is another avenue that the San Francisco 49ers can try to take. Now, they're not going to get much for him, and they're going to want the team taking him to also take on all that dead cap, right? Again, the whole point of not releasing him until after June 1st has to do with spreading out the dead cap hit. You don't want to take all that dead cap at one time. And whenever a team takes on all that salary cap and all that dead cap from the team, what do they got to do? They got to pay a lesser draft pick. The Washington Commanders have one of the 49ers draft picks this year in their pocket. It is their second sixth-round pick. Their second sixth-round pick is the pick that they got from the 49ers in exchange for Brian Robinson Jr. So if you're John Lynch, the general manager of San Francisco 49ers, yeah, Adam Peters is your friend, but Adam Peters is also a contender, a competitor, a rival in this business, and AP knows how this thing goes. Why would you say, I'm just going to let you have my guy free and clear for nothing? No, you're going to say, you know what? I want my sixth-round pick back. And we essentially turn this into, you traded me Brian Robinson Jr., who I got to start using in 2025, in exchange for Brandon Aiyuk, who pound for pound, position to position, when healthy, is a better player overall. And you just can't use him until 2026. That's basically the deal that John Lynch, I would imagine, would probably try to pull off for Brandon Aiyuk. There's also the fact that there are a couple of other players who I think the 49ers might actually be more amicable with and more willing to help out. Guys like Jake Brendel, veteran center, wide receiver DeMarcus Robinson, also edge Bryce Huff. All three of those guys, any of those three guys, could potentially be post-June 1st release players that are released before June 1st, but with that post-June 1st designation. And the 49ers, like I said before, would be doing them a solid by allowing them to go out there and hit the open market early while they manage their cap hits and their accounting and all that stuff on the back end later. And like I told you, there's a limit to how many players they can do that with. So again, if you have other candidates you want to do this for, you could choose the one that saves you the most money, surely. And so I'm not telling you it can't happen or it won't happen. I'm just telling you there is a reason to have this conversation. And then, like I said, that NFL.com article of we could be months away from this being actually finalized and resolved really, really kind of sparked this conversation, because if this is possible and if this is going to happen, and John Lynch is also talking at the NFL Scouting Combine Tuesday, he's scheduled to talk about 5:30 p.m. So there will be more on this. I'm sure he'll be asked about Brandon Aiyuk again there. So we'll find out more. If the San Francisco 49ers intend to make Brandon Aiyuk wait even just a little bit longer, maybe not even all the way till June 1st, but just a little while, the Washington Commanders have to shelter themselves with some insurance away from these power plays. Jalen Nailor is a free agent wide receiver that comes to the name, who could be the name of that insurance policy. That and more coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you in part by FanDuel. Ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll be automatically entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. You get flights, tickets, the whole experience. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. I love futures this time of year, really any time of year, whether it's picking a team to win the championship or grabbing a conference title. It adds the extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. I'm already waiting for the opportunity to put a futures bet on the Wizards to make the playoffs next year. Whenever that drops, I will be a part of it. And now, not only can your pick cash in, but can also send you to the NBA Finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Adam Peters is an interesting situation. There is a wide receiver on the market who is expected to come available at some point in time, Brandon Aiyuk. His quarterback wants to reunite with him. The receiver wants to reunite with the quarterback. It's not going to cost a lot of money, certainly not going to cost what he would normally cost on the open market, and he fits a role that the David Blough offense certainly could use having filled. However, there is the potential complication of a leverage play from the San Francisco 49ers looming over the entire thing. And that is why the Washington Commanders need to go out there and get a little bit of free agency Z receiver insurance, as far as I'm concerned. And you're looking for, again, a lid lifter, a guy that can help stretch the field, stretch the defense, who's not going to break the bank. And I'm looking at a guy like Jalen Nailor, Minnesota Vikings pending free agent. He's been sitting behind Jordan Addison. He's been sitting behind Justin Jefferson. And really, there's not a whole lot of avenue out there. It doesn't appear for him to really climb up the depth chart any further than he already has. So on top of the fact that you may be delayed in getting Brandon Aiyuk in the building, on top of the fact that Brandon Aiyuk is also coming off of that knee injury and will not have played meaningful football in about 2 years by the time you get him on the field, having a guy like Jalen Nailor come in and compete just makes all the sense in the world. Again, he's another receiver who's not going to cost you in the ballpark of what a typical number 2 receiver would cost you. So between Nailor and between Brandon Aiyuk, you'll probably sign about as much as you'll probably spend about as much as it would cost you to sign a true number 2, but you're actually getting 2 bites at the apple to potentially go find your number 2. And there's nothing else that says you can't go through in the draft at some point in time, draft another receiver that might be able to fit that bill and come in as compete. And, you can have too many of one player, certainly, but who says you can't have enough competition at a certain position? Now, again, the draft is after the players, report for the offseason program. So, again, it wouldn't necessarily fill the void of having him in there day one if you're waiting to the draft, but that's why you supplement this move through the draft. I know you build through the draft, supplement through free agency, so bad use of words, but hopefully you understand what I'm talking about here. Go out there and attack free agency, get a guy like Jalen Nailor in the room who is going to come in to compete for a number 2 job, but is not a guy who should be coming in expected to just slide into a number 2 gig, just be handed that job. No, you're coming in here for an opportunity, and certainly make it known, Brandon Aiyuk, you're not coming in here to just be handed a number 2 job either. You're going to have to go out there and show us that you earned it too. We'll let the 2 of you come out there and compete for it. If you do want to wait till the draft, you could possibly go the route of, say, a Carnell Tate out of Ohio State, Mekhi Lemon out of USC. Certainly 2 guys that are very well known in the draft circles, draft conversations, who would fit the role as well. So there are roles here, or there are candidates to fill the role here in free agency and in the NFL draft. But the bottom line is, for me, knowing that the prospect out there is that the San Francisco 49ers are going to leverage the situation a little bit to either stick it to Brandon, not do any favors to the team, getting Brandon, try to get some draft capital out of them, even a little bit of draft capital, and or just prioritize giving other players the benefit of having that pre-June 1st release, post-June 1st designation because they deserve it more. Whatever the combination may be, the fact that the 49ers may decide not to make this a quick process, I think has to be on Adam Peters' radar. I'm sure it already is on Adam Peters' radar, if they're even considering Brandon Aiyuk, because, again, remember, this is very much an external conversation, not necessarily an internal conversation. But it's a conversation that came to mind while I was working on some other stuff, so I wanted to go ahead and discuss that here while we had the opportunity. Again, as this episode is airing, I'm in Indianapolis for the NFL Scouting Combine. Dan Quinn, Adam Peters talking on Tuesday. So Tuesday afternoon, I will come to you with some news and notes from Adam Peters' press conference. We'll drop another full episode Wednesday, which I'm recording before I leave to drop while I drive back. And then we'll drop more notes and observations from Dan Quinn's presser on Wednesday afternoon, or I might just drop those Wednesday morning. We'll see how we do it. Either way, you're going to get two episodes on comments from Indianapolis, and you're going to get 2 other episodes with some interesting takes and some potential ideas. In fact, this very episode sparked another idea that we're going to talk about on our next episode, pertaining to the role that Terry McLaurin might be playing in the David Blough offense. So that's going to do it for today's episode. Make sure you're subscribed and following along Locked On Commanders to get the next episode and all the latest episodes. And if you never miss one, the Everydayer Club is literally built for you. LockedOnCommanders.supercast.com to check that out today, or check the link in the show notes below. Locked On NFL should be your second listen of the day on YouTube or on audio twice per day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon. Check that out wherever you're getting this podcast. And to the Everydayers, I see you. I appreciate you every single day. And I thank you for coming through yet again today. And until next time, everybody out there, stay safe, be kind, and we will talk again real soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.